My name is Gabriella Sherbondi, and I'm here to talk about something that I really do think if we dug deep enough into and had a real conversation about, could 100% save lives in the future, and that is the driving age in our country. Now, in America, right now, the driving age is 16. You can get your permit, and 6 months after that, with all the requirements, you can get your driver's license. Now, it would absolutely amaze me if we could make the driving age start at 18. Now, I 100% understand that 16 to 17-year-olds, they need to go to work. They need to go to school. They need to go to sports and a bunch of other things. But to me, I feel like that is a very small price to pay for saving children's lives because these 17-year-olds, they're children. And are we really going to risk our children's lives for convenience? Because if you ask any of the thousands of families that have lost children this year due to car accidents, they will 100%, without a doubt, no hesitation, say if they could have changed the age to 18, if their child could have not been in that car driving, they would do it if it meant to save that child's life. And the amount of children that die each year because the driver of the car was 16 to 17 or even 15 is astonishing. And let's just talk about this for a second. Do you know how many children die? 16 and 17-year-olds die in car accidents because the driver was 16 to 17 years old. Well, according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, the fatal crash per mile driven is nearly 2 times higher for 16 to 17-year-olds as it is for 18 to 20-year-olds. And that's because you haven't matured yet. There's so much more, there's so many benefactors that go into this, and I'll talk more about those in a second. And the more passengers, each passenger that a teen has in the car, it hires. That percentage hires. And you know how many teenagers drive with so many of their friends in the car? So many. And the thing is that 1/3 of 16 to 17-year-olds are overweight. And eliminating exercise with the driving is a huge negative. And I'm not saying this is the biggest concern we have. Of course not. The biggest concern is safety of 100%. But this is a negative. Now, it's extremely common for teens to drive faster because their friends tease them about driving slow. And we all know this. Everyone knows this. But at 18, that same teen can, consider the consequences and have the maturity to be like, I'm just going to, drive safe enough because they're mature enough. Just 2 years. And do you know how many parents would just rather wait 2 years to have their child be 2 times more safer on the roads because they have, the maturity to do so, and a bunch of other things go into it. And this absolutely blows my mind. 1/3 of deaths in the 13 to 19 range is from car accidents. And that is crazy because we take away those privileges for teenagers to drive. 1/3 of deaths, that is what it is. So we are taking away a huge percentage of deaths in children. And in my eyes, this is unbelievable. So now, my top priority and reason for changing the driving age is 100% safety. But there's a few other things. Insurance policies. When you add your child onto a parent's insurance policy, it raises the cost like $600. And I know this isn't a huge concern, but it is costing families so much more money because children are so much more likely to get into car accidents. And this hires so much more. And if a child was to get a license at 18, this would show parents that their children are more safer on the roads, possibly lowering the price of insurance for children because they're likely to not crash. Teens are 4 times more likely to crash vehicles, which is crazy. And this is just a common fact. Like, teens don't have the materials to drive as safer as more mature 18-year-olds. And with fewer vehicles on the road, this could lead to lower emissions, which could boost our environment. And I know this isn't a huge concern for me as well, but it is a huge benefit that our environment could benefit from it. Now, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, 1,830 drivers from 15 to 18 die in car crashes in 2017. And that's almost 2,000 lives lost. 24% of those drivers were killed because most of them, 24% of them, were ingested alcohol, is what I'm trying to say. So 24, almost, a fourth of those drivers, it was because of alcohol. And this is because, teenagers, although the alcohol age limit is 21, so many teenagers aren't following that age requirement, and so many of them are also given the privileges to drive. And a fourth of these drivers died because they weren't following yet again another rule. So we're giving these teenagers the right to drive when they can't even follow the guidelines to not drink. And 47% of these teenagers that are dying in car crashes weren't wearing a seatbelt. And this is such a small thing, but it can really lead to whether or not this child dies or lives if they're wearing a seatbelt or not. And if we're really trusting them enough to give them the privilege to drive, but they're not following all the procedures, like wearing a seatbelt, not driving under the influence, are they really mature enough to be allowed on the road where they could possibly injure other drivers? And another thing is, I completely understand that taking away a teen's ability to drive puts a lot of pressure on the family, but is this really that big of a thing compared to visiting your child's funeral? I would rather take my child to that soccer game, to that job, over visiting their funeral, because you don't know if you're going to be one of those parents that has to do that, one of those friends that has to go to your friend's funeral. Because watching your child make just one simple mistake while driving, one tiny mistake that they're more likely to make as a teenager, studies have shown they're more likely to make these mistakes, can lead to them killing themselves in the car or lead to them killing another driver. And this, yes, it is a possibility for anyone, no matter what age you are, to kill someone else while driving on the road, but it is more likely that your child do that. And it is, how it how it would affect someone that, taking a life while driving. Maybe you don't get injured, maybe your child or the passengers in your child's car don't get injured, but what if they injure someone else on the road? That stays with you your whole life. Another reason why teenagers are 4 times more likely to get into a car accident is because they're more reckless with the drinking, drugs, sleep, lack of sleep, and just distractions with other people in the car. Food, phones is a huge one. They're just more likely to do all of these things that you're not supposed to do while driving. And this isn't like, teenagers are more likely to do these things, so why are we giving them the privilege to drive? We're simply just taking these lives, 2,000 lives a year. And that's just deaths. There's so many more teenagers that 2,000 is just the number of deaths. There's a lot more teenagers that are getting injured, lifelong injuries, and even hurting other people on the road. So if we limit the age limit in America to 18 and we void all the younger licenses, this would make the roads 4 times more safer for mature drivers, and your children would be a lot safer. So giving a 16 to 17-year-old a driver's license is giving a baby a knife. And because you have the idea, you don't know if they're going to hurt someone. When you give a baby a knife, you don't know if they're going to specifically try to hurt themselves with it, but you're also not going to take that chance. You're not going to give the child a knife because you don't know what they're going to do with it. Yeah, they could just sit there with it, but they might hurt themselves. So you're giving a teenager a license, and yeah, they could just, use it the right way. But personally, I don't really think a lot of people out there are going to take that chance. So now I'm going to talk about some children in Pennsylvania in our area, or at least close to our area, that never got the chance to put down the keys and choose safety. So first we're going to talk about the story. Right here, there was a car crash and two children had died. One was injured, and this was a high-speed crash, one late Tuesday afternoon in Fayette County. The driver was Kyler Catlett, and he was 17 years old, of Smithfield. He was speeding in his Honda Accord down Route 119 south at 10:50 p.m., and he just lost control around a bend in the road and crossed northbound lane. Police said that he struck a grassy embankment and he went airborne and then overturned. He was hit by a telephone pole and a stone wall, and the fire chief estimated that he was going over 100 miles per hour. And I'm not sure about you, but Route 119, the speed limit is not 100 miles per hour. So he was the driver, and then his passenger up front was Yolanda Jackson. She was also 17, and she also passed away. She lived in Uniontown, and they were both dead on the scene. And 16-year-old girl from Uniontown was in the back seat. She was also flown to Ruby Memorial Hospital in Morgantown, West Virginia, for treatment. She did not pass away, but she was a child in the back seat that did get injured badly. And here's the facts. So the driver that did pass away, Catlett, he was a junior, just like most of the people probably watching this video, at Albert Gallatin High School. He was a member of the dance team. He made cheerleading squad, and he lost his life because of one mistake that he was more likely to make because he's a teenager, because he doesn't have the tools to know not to speed. He's not mature enough to know that. He's not mature enough to, they said in the news report, he may have been texting, but he doesn't have the maturity to know not to do these things. Yes, we know yes or no, but we're not mature enough to actually choose to say, I'm not going to do that. That's just not worth it. We know it's wrong. We know it's not right to go 100 miles, but are we mature enough to go, you know what, I'm not going to do it? There's a difference between knowing it's wrong and actually not doing it. And the girl Jackson, she was a junior at Uniontown Area High School. She was a member of the basketball team, a track and field, and they were both juniors. Could you imagine if they lived less than an hour away from us? Could you imagine if the person next to you tomorrow you showed up and they're not there anymore because they were in a car crash? Could you imagine if you had to go to your best friend's funeral because she made one tiny mistake? Because everyone's going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to make mistakes on the road. You know, no matter if you're a teenager or not. But as a child, as a teenager, you're more likely to make those mistakes, and you're more likely to not survive from them. And that's just the facts. And can you imagine just how would you feel if your best friend, the person sitting across from you, they didn't make it? And is it really worth the chance to have the freedom to drive? Is it really worth that? Because if it is to you, and it's not that we don't know if it's going to happen. 2,000 at least, as we saw by the numbers earlier, die each year. And this isn't some years they die, some years they don't. No, at least 1,000 kids die each year due to car crashes. This isn't sometimes it happens, sometimes it does. It always happens every year. So are we just going to wait around until we know the person or until it affects us? Because we changed this driving age in America, we're saving those lives. No matter what, there's not a doubt that we're saving lives. Because we change it to 18, that number will go down. Because 18-year-olds are more mature. There's not a doubt. This isn't maybe it will save lives. No, it will save lives. Children will be safer, and there will be less families grieving because of this. Another story was from, let me check here. So I have two more stories here, but I just wanted to say something else. I personally don't think a lot of families in America And a lot of teenagers would rather be able to have the freedom to go out to drive. What if your best friend does? These children, these two kids we just read in this story, they didn't get to make it to graduation. Their best friends, their friends, their team members on their basketball team, track field team, dance team, they didn't get to see them graduate. Their friends had to walk down graduation, and they didn't get to look up and see their friend smiling in a cap and gown. They never made it that far because they chose to drive, because driving was that important to them. And that is extremely upsetting to me. But we're going to talk about another story here. This girl, it was 16-year-old driver. She died on a Sunday. And the injuries were from a head-on collision that happened Summit Township on a Friday, but she died in the hospital on a Sunday, a few days later. The crash was on Mason-Dixon Highway north of Brant Road, just before 4:30 p.m. She failed to stay. I'm sorry. It's a him. Sorry, my bad. He failed to stay in his lane and drove into the southbound lane, crashing head on to the other vehicle that was there. The other vehicle was a 35-year-old man, and the 35-year-old man didn't end up dying, but this driver did. The 16-year-old driver did. He died in the hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. That's where he was flown to. And then the 16-year-old Leah Smith was also killed in the violent crash. And this is another story. So we do not know the name of the 16-year-old child that died in that story, but he did lose his life. And this was in Pennsylvania. He was just driving down the road, lost control, went into another lane, and head-on collision with another driver. And his life was taken because of that. And another story is this 16-year-old girl, Leah Smith. She was killed in a violent crash that nearly cut her car into two pieces. And she was on her way to school. She was a junior, just like most of the people watching this video. She was a junior at Belle Vernon School, which is very close to us. And she just lost control of her Honda Civic. She was coming out of a curve while driving a Thursday morning, and her car veered off the road sideways, slammed into a tread, and then she was pronounced dead on the scene. She was not wearing her seatbelt, and speed was an issue, and it was a factor in the crash. And simply because she was a teenager, she wasn't mature enough to be able to not speed and to not wear her seatbelt. Wearing her seatbelt could have saved her life. One of the chief of fire department said in the news story, but she wasn't mature enough to make that decision. And this is one of the downfalls of this driving age, because 16 and 17-year-olds are given the privilege to do these things, to drive. And one simple mistake that we know everyone makes, it's just the deciding factor. There's not a single 16 to 17-year-old out there that is going to abide by every single rule when they drive. And it's just about, if that mistake you make, it's just about if it's going to cost you your life or not. If it's going to cost you could live, the passengers could die. Or the car, if you crash into another car, those passengers could die. It's just about if that's going to happen. It's just about, is this going to be me? Is this going to be my son? Is this going to be my daughter that takes the life of another car full of passengers? Is it going to be my daughter or son who is driving a car and they take the lives of their friends? And you just don't know who it's going to be. You don't know if it's going to be you. And we're just going through our everyday lives, just letting our children do these things, just crossing our fingers they're not one of them. Because sometimes it's not about, your child could be the safest driver out there, and it is just about mistakes that just happen. You could be the safest driver out there, but still sometimes another like, for instance, another car could be a mature driver, but it could wreck into your child's car. Now, if you're mature enough, you may know how to get out of that situation better than a teenager could. If a car is coming at me and I don't know what to do, if I'm mature enough, maybe I know how to get out of this situation better than a teenager might. And this could cost me my life. And it's just about, are we going to wait around to see if I'm one of those people, to see if I'm going to make it? Or are we going to wait around to see, hopefully my child isn't one of those victims? And that's just something I'm not willing to sacrifice. I'm not willing to sacrifice my life. I'm not willing to sacrifice the lives of other people, because this is something that we're just standing around letting happen, pretending it's not happening when it is. And the victims, the families of these victims, they're the only ones that would 100% agree with me. But that's because they've went through it. Everyone else is just waiting and waiting until they go through it. So that's why I strongly encourage this decision of hiring the driving limit to 18, because this would save lives. There's no doubt in it. Like I said earlier, there's no doubt in it. There would lives be saved. So thank you for listening to me. I know that not everyone's going to 100% see my side, but thank you for listening to me, and that's it.